So far in the shoreline management plans, we've looked at the need to identify the risks of flooding. We've looked then at the preferred policy approach, and the first aspect of that have been the two factors that you need to bear in mind whenever you're making your decision, your cost-benefit analysis, weighing up the benefits of the economic value of what it is you'll be protecting and enhancing versus the costs of building and maintaining, and then these aspects of environmental impact assessment. So once you've looked at those factors, the next thing that you move on to in this process in the shoreline management plan are the broad policy approaches that you can adopt. So let's get a bit of an overview of them. There they are. Take a quick read through, please. And the policies themselves, the approaches themselves are pretty much doing exactly what you would think. So hold the line, what do you imagine? Advance, managed retreat? Let's take a look and see if you're right. Here they are. So the first one here with the hold the line. The idea would be to put in some kind of management there that will literally hold the line. This would be the case if you've got, as I've shown here in this icon, some high value infrastructure, building, urban area, whatever it would be behind where you need to protect that from the erosion that would happen. In this case, they've used the hard engineering strategy of groins. So if that's hold the line, what do you think advance the line is going to do? This is where you try to have some kind of coastal management that pushes the coast out a little bit rather than allowing it to erode. You can probably imagine that this one isn't used too often. Hold the line, much more so. Advanced line, not really. And what about managed retreat? Well, you will notice, first of all, a little bit of a difference here. The infrastructure intensity is much, much less here. So your managed retreat is going to go inland. It's basically to sacrifice what is there so that that can be an input of sediment into the rest of the sediment cell, as we saw in the first video. And unfortunately, you're abandoning, well, no, you're not abandoning, that's the wrong word. It's managed retreat. You're allowing those buildings to be lost, but you're managing the process. So here's a little bit more detail on each of those processes. Just take a few moments to read through this table now, please. So the ones that tend to be most common would be the hold the line and the managed retreat. Advanced line is rare. No active intervention is only going to be used if there is nothing there in terms of human activity really that can be affected by it. So it's particularly the hold the line and the managed retreat. Now, which policy decisions have been taken? Here we're back again to, there's Happisburgh, and this one, Cromer. Now, I'm not so much talking about the methods here, the groins as you can see, or the old revetments here. What have the policy decisions been? Well, in this one, you can very much see that this is managed retreat. Those revetments that were built probably in the 1950s, 60s, something like that, have fallen into a state of repair. We saw all of that in detail in the first video. They have not been repaired. Now, there is some management of the retreat. This is your boulders or your riprap, as they're called, just put here to try and manage this because there are some homes there. But that's just a short-term strategy. In the long term, this part of the coast will experience this. This will retreat. In contrast over here, it's very much hold the line. There is the wall that's been built. There are the groins to hold on the beach in that area. And you can see that there is a significant investment in the hard engineering here, which will require ongoing maintenance, of course, because of the need here to protect what was behind. Now, here are some examples of the policy decision taken from the Shoreline Management Plan in North Norfolk. As I say, this is literally the process that they go through in real life in England and Wales to do this. So these are different areas around North Norfolk, and you can see the policy option here from the present day. So in this case, no active intervention. But you come down here to a place called Sheringham. They're holding the line. In the medium term, hold, and the long term. Now, the long term here is up to 100 years. So this is very much looking, not just today, not just in the years and decades to come, but a century ahead. What is it you're going to do? This is hold the line across all of here. Cromer, that's the one we've just looked at. Hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. So they're going to hold it all the way through, 100 years in advance. Why? Because again, look at the infrastructure there that needs to be protected. Cost-benefit analysis would say that that intervention is worthwhile because of what you're protecting in behind. But you move on down a little bit, and this is in towards the area here of towards where Happisburgh is, and you can see here that the managed retreat, or in this case called managed realignment, the spec refers to retreat, so it will use that term. But once you've managed that retreat process, once you have found a way of managing that, then stepping back, no intervention, because the area will have reached a natural balance. So you can see here how they've gone through those policy decisions for each of these different areas around the coast and are looking at that from today into the longer term. Now, let's take a look at some examples of these. We've looked at photographs, but these again are examples specifically from the Shoreline Management Plan. Now, what I want you to notice here is the justification made for the decision. I've kept on trying to emphasize to you here, when you make a decision, not everybody's going to like it. You are going to annoy some people, and they're going to come gunning for you. So you'd better be able to justify the choices that you're making. Now, that is what happens in the real world, and in the decision-making exercise that you do in geography, it's the same kind of thing. You have got to justify your choices. So this is Cromer. We've been here a number of occasions now. Here's the map of it. There is the pier going out there, the grounds that are sitting there. And the plan here is this. The recommended long-term plan for Cromer is to continue to protect assets from within the town through defending the present position. So they've clearly stated, hold the line. This is technically sustainable. Now, due to, here comes the justification, the relatively low sediment transport rates and therefore limited impact on adjacent shores. Now, let me just explain a little bit what that means and put that into more everyday language. We'll come back to this one. Basically, what they're saying here is that the likes of Happisburgh is an important source of sediment for further on down the coast to protect them. This is an input of sand into the system which maintains the beaches. If you stop all erosion, you stop the input of sand, and you actually end up losing all your beaches. So this is an important input into the system. What they're saying here about Cromer, though, is that this is not, even if it was in its natural form, it's not a major input of sediment into the system. So even if you stop the input of sediment here by placing these walls along the bottom of the cliffs, you're not cutting off a major input of sediment. Back to this again. It's technically sustainable due to the relatively low sediment transport rates, and therefore limited impact on adjacent shores. So this area here has limited transport of sand in, limited input, so it has limited impact further on down here. So your environmental impact assessment in action. Notice the next sentence. The town is a key service centre for the region, providing a range of facilities that support the surrounding communities. That's your cost-benefit analysis. This is the function of the town here that needs protecting. So, how does this sentence in this paragraph work? Its recommendation is clearly stated, defend the present position. Hold the line. Why? Well, environmental impact assessment suggests that there's a relatively small input of sediment here, so it's okay to do it. And the cost-benefit analysis indicates that you have got to protect this settlement, because of the function that it occupies and performs for the local area. Making your decision, justifying that decision for holding the line at Cromer. This is just downstream. There's Cromer there. We've now down the shore. We've just come down the shore to a place called Overstrand. And here you can see probably already, there's the edge of Cromer. Here's Overstrand. You can see already that there's a difference of approach. So let's look at this paragraph. The cliffs along this length of shoreline provide a vital sediment source for much of the shoreline management plan frontage. Therefore, maintaining this sediment input is a key aim for the region as a whole. In contrast to Cromer, this is an area that does provide a major input of sediment. So this is basically saying, we're just going to let this one be eroded. Also, there are also few socioeconomic assets at risk along this cliff top. Therefore, there is no justification economically for investment in defences along this frontage. Okay, so there's your cost-benefit analysis. And you can see this from the map. Look at the density of housing and infrastructure and roads and services, electricity, etc. Everything that's caught up in a town there. Fields. So there is no justification economically for protecting that. It goes on. Coupled with this is the fact that the cliffs are designated at the European level for their conservation importance, which is partly maintained by the progressive erosion, which exposes areas of the cliff and allows successional cycles of plant communities, which provide much of the botanical value, and hence would be maintained by allowing erosion to continue. Okay, again, let me translate that into slightly more everyday language. Basically, this area is protected by a European Union environmental protection. And the erosion processes that are going on here are part of those natural processes that encourage plant succession to occur here to maintain this as part of an area for its conservation. So, environmental impact assessment. If you interfere with the natural processes here, it has environmental consequences, and this is protected by law. This isn't just, oh, let's all go and hug a tree and feel good about the environment. No, this is protected by law. The law says you must protect. Now, this is going to be difficult for maybe some of the people whose houses are lost. Maybe there might be one or two in these areas, that kind of thing. Are you really telling me that the environment is more important than my house? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Now, of course, you would break the news to them, hopefully slightly more gently than that. But yes, and there is your justification. Last sentence. Although it will be important to ensure that the defences of Cromer are not outflanked, the long-term plan is to allow this area to retreat. Here's your managed retreat. So there you can see the managed retreat happening here in this area. Next up, we take a look at Happisburgh. We've moved on down a little bit to that place that we've looked at many times. And what's the plan here? What's the policy approach? In the long term, it would not be appropriate to defend Happisburgh. Why? Well, they're going to do managed retreat here, right? What's the justification? Due to the impact this would have in the shoreline management plan, shoreline as a whole, as the coastal retreat would, either side would result in the development of this area as a promontory, making it both definitely or technically difficult to sustain and impacting significantly upon alongshore sediment along the downdrift areas. So basically they're saying if you protect Happisburgh, what will happen is this will erode here, here to form a bay. There'll be a bay the other side and you'll get a kind of like a headland here. So the sediment will build up in the bay and that will stop sediment being transported further down the shore. And you need sediment transported further down the shore because you've got much, much larger settlements and you've also got some major towns down there. Although there are implications such as loss to erosion of residential properties and amenities at Happisburgh, these are not sufficient to economically justify building new defences. There is your cost-benefit analysis. The cost of the defences is much greater than the value of what would being saved. And there's the justification. I hope you can sense the argument coming through here. This is why we're making this controversial decision. Yes, I know you'll not be happy, but this is why we're making the decision. Therefore, the long-term plan is to allow natural functioning of the coastline by allowing it to retreat. However, in the short term, the Council will make every effort to minimise the rate of coastal erosion using appropriate temporary measures, including the maintenance of the existing rock bund. That's just their way of referring to that riprap, those boulders that I showed you. Where are they? There they are. Temporary measures of maintaining those. with a view to allowing time for measures to be introduced to allow people to adapt to the changes in the medium, remember decades, and long term up to the century. That is your managed retreat. Okay, once you've made your policy decision, but the two that are most common are hold the line and managed retreat. What are the methods you can use to enact it? These are the methods that you've covered at GCSE. So this is where it corresponds a little bit more with your GCSE thinking. So what would be some of the hard engineering strategies? What are some of the soft engineering strategies? Have we look at those and make sure that you're clear on those. We've already done some work on that. The final thing then is the impacts of the decision that you need to consider. Any decision that you make will have impacts on the physical environment and impacts on the human environment, and there's the list of some of the things that you need to consider. And again, this shoreline management plan, this framework for decision making, takes you through those and gives you this framework to think, right, what are the impacts on all of these things from the decision that you make? Any decision will have consequences. Even if you're convinced that in balance, this is the best decision, all things considered, there will be impacts. Positive, we hope, of course, why do it otherwise? But also negative. Happisburgh, the people will lose their homes. And the shoreline management plan needs to outline these. Now here is exactly that for Happisburgh. And again, look at the time period. You're looking at the short term, the medium term and the long term, up to a century in advance from when the shoreline management plan was first put in place. And they're looking here at these impacts across a range of different categories, the property, so that's your economic aspects. You've also got your nature, conservation, your environmental aspects. You've also got some of your cultural aspects here. So in the early stages, they're not imagining any problem with these ones. But remember, we looked at that church right back in the first video. Some of these, the historical legacy here might be at risk from this one. So you're actually sacrificing that. You're saying, no, in the grand scheme of things, actually, there's little we can do about it. So you can pause the video if you like and take a more leisurely look through these. But the key thing to pick out is this time period. And all of these different things that you're looking at here. This is a wide range of social and environmental factors. And this is your very long-term scale. This is sustainability. This is making decisions now that are very much thinking about the impact on future generations. So, shoreline management plan, a framework for decision making. You look at the risks to flooding, you identify those. That was the first video. Then your preferred policy approach, you can look at cost benefit analysis, the value of what is being saved versus the cost of the defences to maintain it. Your environmental impact assessment, including the impact of climate change. Once you've looked at those factors, then you've got four main approaches: hold the line, and advance the line, manage retreat, and no active intervention, and especially hold the line and manage retreat. Once you have decided on those, you then look at your methods. You may need to draw from hard engineering if you need to hold the line. That might be part of what you're doing, and you will have to justify that. Or your soft engineering methods, you need to be able to outline those in detail. And then finally, you look at the impacts of your decision on the physical and human environment. Now, folks, I started off by showing you just the headlines there in red for this knowledge schema. You've got this in your notes. So as you're going through this, there's a lot of detail there. That is certainly building on what you had at GCSE. There are some elements of that you will have seen before, but significant elements of this, including the detail, is very, very new. As always, I will recommend that you have the knowledge schema in front of you. That is your framework. Framework, see what I did there? This is your framework that you will hang the detail on. And what you'll have to do at A2 level is really be able to expand, as I have done in these videos, to be able to give examples of hold the line, go into Cromer and give the justification, look at the environmental impact assessment, cost benefit analysis, go ahead into the future and look at the impacts of the decision. But the key underpinning it all is this knowledge schema. So get that into your head, use it to help you get the details in place.